Welcome everyone to the February 2024 meeting of the Humanist Society of Santa Barbara. We're here today in the sanctuary room of Live Oak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. They've been very gracious in letting us use this room today, and we very much appreciate that. So the Humanist Society is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're 100% volunteer run. We've been around since the mid-90s. We've got about 115 members. We always welcome new members to join us. So let's talk about our speaker. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today. It's Jeff Jackson. And Jeff began his career in the world of advertising. He founded his own agency, and he went on to write and direct award-winning commercials with video content. He wrote, directed, and starred in the acclaimed short film, Our First Fight, a romantic comedy which toured film festivals around the world. His feature-length black comedy screenplay, called White Collared, was set in corporate America. It won the best screenplay at the Santa Barbara Film Festival, 2010. And the film festival just ended yesterday, so we thought this tie-in was nice with the Santa Barbara experience of films over the last 10 days. His first work for the stage was creating the book and the lyrics for a musical adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, produced off-Broadway and starred Tony nominee Hunter Foster, and the Associated Press praised it for bringing the classic tale thrillingly to life. His second play, 2.0, and O is OH, is a dark comedy, kind of along the lines of Black Mirror, although it happened before Black Mirror. It debuted in Detroit, where the Detroit Free Press called it one of the most thought-provoking plays of the season. In its New York debut, 2.0 was a critic's pick in the New York Times. They praised it as smart, provocative, and funny. Most recently, Jeff wrote, directed, and produced the groundbreaking hybrid video game live-action movie Damon 9, broadly praised by players and press alike. The Horror Network hailed it as an astonishing achievement. Jeff has also directed several theatrical productions in the New York area, including Love in the Middle Ages, a New York Musical Theater Festival winner, and a regional production of the musical Ragtime. We are so honored to have you here with us today talking about atheism in the movies. Please welcome Jeff Jackson. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, everyone, for coming here and braving the weather. Thanks to everyone on Zoom. We'll do a Q&A after my presentation, both from people here in the audience, and if you're watching on Zoom and have a question for me, put it in the chat. Atheism goes to the movies. I've given this talk several times. This is the first time I've given it in a church. Okay, well, congregation's close enough for me. But I guess if you're going to give it in a congregation, Unitarianism has the least calories. It's very low fat. So I hope I don't offend anyone who's a member of both. But with that said, I will begin. Elton John. I know it's strange to be in a presentation about movies with a rock star, but bear with me, it'll make sense in a few minutes. In 1979, Elton John gave a series of concerts in the former Soviet Union behind the Iron Curtain. Now, he wasn't the first pop star to do this, but he was by far the biggest. Now, over the next few years, others followed. Not in the Soviet Union itself, but they'd perform in West Berlin, and they'd broadcast the music over the wall. Then in 1988, Billy Joel pushed the envelope even further with a 10-city tour of the USSR. In 1989, the very next year, the Berlin Wall fell. Let's move a little closer to home. In 2009, the hit ABC sitcom Modern Family began its very successful 11-year run. And it featured a loving, committed gay couple who lived in a civil union with an adopted daughter. 6 years later, gay marriage became the law of the land. Now, do these bits of pop culture single-handedly bring about this seismic change? No, of course not. But smarter people than me have written extensively about the causal relationship between pop culture and social progress. And the connection is irrefutable. And it leads me to wonder, can the same thing work for atheism? I think it can, but it sure as hell has not begun yet. As a matter of fact, I think we're about at -50. And let me explain what I'm talking about. As an atheist, it tends to tickle my antenna whenever I see atheist or atheism even remotely mentioned or depicted in movies and television. So, like, for instance, in the Fox TV series House, Hugh Laurie's character, Dr. Gregory House, is an outspoken atheist. The show's not about that, of course. It's about him being a brilliant diagnostician. But he is an atheist, and he'll voice atheist views now and again. Of course, he's also a narcissist, a curmudgeon. He abuses pain medication, and is a general asshole. Can I say that in here? I'm sorry, he is. Seriously, I don't think the man smiled once in 8 seasons. In the Netflix series Dead to Me, Christina Applegate's character was an atheist. They don't put it front and center, but just like Gregory House, occasionally she would voice some clear atheist views now and again. She's also an alcoholic with anger management issues. A few years ago, a friend said to me, "Jeff, you're an atheist. You'll love this movie called The Sunset Limited." Maybe some of you have heard of it. It was made in 2011 and stars Samuel L. Jackson and Tommy Lee Jones. It was available on demand, so I demanded it. In it, Jones plays a college professor who is an atheist. He's also divorced, alone, despondent, depressed, alcoholic, and suicidal. And at the start of the movie, he throws himself in front of a New York City subway train, and Sam Jackson is a person of faith who rescues him, and they spend the rest of the movie debating the existence of God. Now, if you can't tell, Jones here on the right is the atheist, and we know this because, well, look at him. Let's take another look at all these big screen atheists. We have miserable, despondent, and suicidal, a hot mess, and an angry asshole. I don't know about you, but I'm detecting a pattern here. Atheist in pop culture has become shorthand for someone who is seriously troubled and messed up. Being a screenwriter myself, I know how screenwriters think. It's not meant maliciously. It's convenient shorthand. It's kind of the way 30 years ago, every gay character was a florist or a hairdresser. It's a stereotype, and stereotypes are awful, but they're a real time saver. But wait, you may say, what about The Ledge? I don't know if any of you have heard of this movie. It's also from 2011 and was touted by its writer-director Matthew Chapman as the first pro-atheist feature film ever to be released in America. Wow. Okay, well, let's look at The Ledge. And just a warning, if you haven't seen it yet, there's going to be some spoilers, although considering it only got 14% on Rotten Tomatoes, it's pretty spoiled already. In it, the lovely Liv Tyler is married to Patrick Wilson, who is a fundamentalist Christian. And into their lives comes Gavin, played by Charlie Hunnam. He is an atheist, the atheist hero that Chapman promised us. Gavin, shortly after meeting this couple, decides that since he's an atheist and Patrick Wilson is a rabid religious fanatic, he really only has one choice, and that is to sleep with the man's wife. Because that's what atheists do, right? We have no moral compass, after all. This is from an atheist writer-director, mind you. They say there's like self-hating Catholics, self-hating Jews. I think Matthew Chapman may be a self-hating atheist. But back to the plot. In the story, Patrick Wilson finds out about their affair, and citing the Old Testament remedy for adultery, which is to kill both of the adulterers, he fetches his gun. Because, of course, all Christians have guns and will use them, according to Matthew Chapman. But instead of killing Gavin, he offers him a compromise. Either Gavin goes to the ledge of a tall building, that's the ledge in the title, in case you missed it, and throws himself off of it, or Patrick Wilson will kill his lover, who happens to be his wife. Yeah, it's a feel-good movie. Bring the kids. Thankfully, The movie did terribly. And all I want to say to fellow atheist writer-director Matthew Chapman is, thanks, but no thanks, you're not helping. But not only is Hollywood constantly now denigrating atheists, it's actively promoting religion all the time. This may seem like an odd thing to say because Hollywood is most often accused of undermining religious values. But the overwhelming majority of movies are pro-God. Let me repeat that. The overwhelming majority of Hollywood movies promote a belief in God. Don't believe me? Well, let's start with horror movies. Because if Satan and demons and hell exist, then God must too, right? And we all know that scores of horror movies are released each year that are all pretty much off of the same point of view. And you might say, okay, well, that's horror movies. They're often a side category. Surely mainstream Hollywood movies don't promote a belief in God. Or do they? The afterlife, ghosts, angels, often the big guy himself, are often frequent characters in mainstream Hollywood movies, and they have been for years and will continue to be. And when Hollywood isn't directly promoting God, they're making straight up Bible stories and have been forever. We had a spate of them recently. Noah, what were some of the others? The Exodus was remade. And if Hollywood isn't pitching God hard enough, there's the absolute onslaught of movies made these days by the religious community itself. Some of you may have heard of PureFlix. This is a company based in Scottsdale, Arizona. I've learned they recently changed their name to Pinnacle Peak, because I guess maybe PureFlix was a little too on the nose. But they've launched their own mini-major movie studio. In Hollywood, of course, we all know the big studios, but ever since the breakdown of the big studio system in like the 1970s, there's what they call mini-majors. And any production entity that can produce a slate of movies every year is a mini-major. And if you go to their website, they have what they call their own movie ministry. And if you think this is small potatoes, to date, PureFlix has either produced or co-produced 229 feature films, including some titles you may have heard of that actually played theatrically, like God's Not Dead, God's Not Dead 2, and God's Not Dead 3. I have a feeling God's Not Dead 11 is not far behind. So whether we're talking about PureFlix or mainstream Hollywood, the deck seems pretty much stacked against atheism. So what do we do about it as atheists in the creative community like I am? Let me put a pin in that a minute and take a minute to tell you about my own journey to atheism. I was raised a Christian. My family weren't rabid evangelicals, they're just garden variety Protestants. I went to Sunday school. I took it seriously into my 20s. And my faith didn't explode in one moment. There was no trauma or anything like that. It just eroded over the course of several years as I came to look at the world differently, maybe understand a little too much about the way the world worked, to sustain those beliefs. Nothing against people who do hang on to those beliefs, but it just didn't work for me anymore. But the thing that really tipped me over the edge during that time when I was kind of on the fence and unsure was I worked every day at a day job alongside this really nice guy named Bob. This is a picture of Bob with his infant son, Ben. I think Ben is now well out of college, but we liked all the same bands and movies and got all the same jokes, and we became friends. And then one day, Bob told me he was an atheist. We had never discussed God or religion before. I don't even remember how it came up, but he didn't offer much more than that. He just, said, oh no, I don't believe in God. And he didn't offer any long-winded arguments or try to convince me of anything. That was it. But for me, where I was at that time, that was enough. Just knowing someone who was an atheist and knowing that they were a decent, moral, good family man and a cool person who had their life together that wasn't like the people depicted in these movies and TV shows, gave me kind of permission to try on a pair of atheist glasses, if you will, and look at the world through those lenses. And for me, then, there was just no turning back. But let's get back to the movies. My great passion in life is the performing arts. I'm from the New York area. Film, television, and theater have been my passion for as long as I can remember. As Judy mentioned, I wrote 2 plays that were produced in New York City. Both are published and in licensing and been performed around the world. I've written screenplays that have been bought by established producers. I was an assignment writer for Disney Animation for a while. I made an award-winning short film that toured the world. I know how to write a good movie. I know how to make a good movie. So a few years ago, I thought to myself, if I want to see a movie that includes a positive view of atheism, I need to make it. The right kind. The kind that combined all of these experiences. The examples of how rock and roll and TV affected positive change. Avoiding the negative example of all the horrible depictions of atheists I've seen in movies and television, and the positive experience of the example set by my atheist friend Bob. I wanted to combine that all in a story that could represent atheism the way I knew it needed to be done. And for years, I kicked around various stories, ideas. I knew I didn't want to make some dark, angry screed like The Ledge, but what? So for years, I kicked around various story ideas. And I finally found the answer in an episode from my own life. And what do they always say? Like, write what you know, right? Years ago, long after I had became an atheist, although I was convinced, I was kind of passive about it. I kind of had a live and let live sort of attitude. At that time in my life, I was married to my now ex-wife, and we got engaged, and she came from a very Catholic family. Do you remember that scene in The Godfather 3 where Michael Corleone gets like knighted by the Pope? Yeah, her dad got one of those. No lie, that's how Catholic they were. So there was no way we were going to have a secular wedding. And as for my bride, she didn't take her faith that seriously, so I knew that wasn't going to be an issue, but still the wedding was going to be Catholic. So I agreed to go along with it on one condition. I wasn't going to lie. I wasn't going to stand up there and say I believed something I didn't. I wasn't going to say I didn't believe something I did. And that was our agreement. But as some of you may know about the Catholic Church, they're pretty particular about the weddings they perform in their church. You have to go through an interview with a priest. You may have to go through like a type of training kind of called pre-cana, or sometimes they call it marriage encounter. So the question was, how were we going to get through this? And it started with the interview with the priest. So we did this, and my fiance was like sweating bullets, wondering what I was going to say. But I went in with like a don't ask, don't tell policy, and the guy never asked. He asked me how I was raised, and I said I was raised in the Protestant church, and that was the truth. But he never asked me, by the way, do you believe in God? If he had, he would have gotten an earful, and that might have been the end of everything, but he never asked. So we kind of skirted through that, but I always wondered what would have happened if that interview had gone a little differently. And that inspired me to write a romantic comedy, an atheist romantic comedy. It's about a nice young girl named Melissa who wants to marry a nice young guy named Charlie, who happens to be an atheist. Only Melissa's mom is a very devout Catholic, and to please her and have a traditional Catholic wedding in the family's church, just like my fiance did, Melissa persuades Charlie to keep his atheism quiet until after the wedding. And it's all going to plan until they're assigned a young novice priest whose own face is a little shaky. And when this priest interviews Charlie, he inadvertently ends up talking him out of the priesthood. And it's called Our Goddamn Wedding. And I have you laughing already, so you know it's going to be a good comedy. It is funny, it's fun, it's inclusive, it's life-affirming. I intentionally do not beat the audience over the head with atheist arguments, although I do definitely slip a few in. I represent religious characters not as idiotic straw men, but as three-dimensional characters that you can like and identify with as well. And mostly, I give people the chance to experience what I experienced in my life, which is the chance to just meet an atheist who is a normal, nice guy, get to know him, and get to like him. He's not a broken, despondent mess like the way so many atheists are being depicted. And my hope is that maybe people see this movie, they'll kind of get that same permission that I got to take a look at life through an atheist lens and see how it looks. The feature-length script has gotten tremendous feedback. There's an organization called We Screenplay that is one of the leading organizations in the industry for ranking unmade screenplays, and they gave it an overall score of 90%, which is like unheard of. They never give out much higher than that. And you can see some of the quotes they made about it. It was a finalist in one of the best competitions in the industry by the Final Draft Big Break competition. The stills that I've been showing you are from a 12-minute excerpt that I produced and directed, kind of a short film as it serves as a proof of concept. And now I'm trying to raise money to make the feature film. I'm putting about $100,000 of my own money into it. It has a budget of a little under $1 million, and I'm about halfway there. So, to be perfectly transparent, my purpose here today is twofold. First, of course, I wanted to share my perspective on how atheists have been treated by the entertainment industry, because I think it's important. And if you're an atheist or a skeptic or a secular humanist or an agnostic, whatever you call yourself, you should care about the way we're perceived by our fellow citizens. And as I've demonstrated, pop culture and entertainment media has a powerful hand in those trends, and it's right now actively misshaping that perception of us. But of course, I'm also hoping that maybe one of you, either here today in person or watching online, would like to join me in making this movie and help make it a reality, whether that's by investing in it or offering resources, connections, anything that helps make it a reality. Because beyond our personal stake in this kind of project, there's a practical business aspect to it as well. You've surely all seen polls and articles about how the nones, the religiously unaffiliated, are the fastest growing religious category in America. So I just wonder if perhaps the time is right, or if not right now, it sure soon will be, where a segment of the audience would embrace a film with a secular message, with a non-religious message. This is a fantastic time to be an indie filmmaker. There is an abundance of streaming platforms that have given small, unknown films the chance to break through and find an audience and make its money back. Not too long ago, that would have been impossible. You would only have a handful of major outlets to go to, and they would all say no to something like this. But it's a different world now. You can go to our website, ourgoddamnwedding.com, and watch the short and read all about it. And if you know anyone, particularly in the motion picture industry, who might want to support a project like this, please share that link with them. So in conclusion, can my one little low-budget indie film correct this horrible imbalance of how atheists are depicted in the media in one fell swoop? Of course not. But remember at the top of my presentation, I mentioned that Elton John was not the first pop star to play in Russia. The very first was Cliff Richard. I don't know if any of you know who Cliff Richard is. Certainly no one under 50 would know who Cliff Richard is. He was a minor star. Cliff went first. Elton heard about it, and not long after he went, and then another followed, and another. So I'm not going to pretend I can be Elton John, but I think I can be Cliff Richard. I think we all can be Cliff Richard together. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
So do we have any questions in the room?
The title of your movie is going to project humor.
Mm-hmm.
So even if there was someone who might be turned by watching it, they're going to ignore it because it's funny.
I suppose there's some segment of the audience might, but I actually think that's the strongest weapon I have. It's kind of like taking medicine with a little sugar. I think romantic comedies are a genre that are very popular right now, particularly on the streaming platforms. Netflix alone has scores of romantic comedies that never made it to the theaters, if you just browse through that category, but they're very popular. So I chose that genre specifically to kind of provide a smoother on-ramp for something with this message, a bit of a Trojan horse.
I thought atheism was a growing group.
Well, it's growing slowly, but there's also what I mentioned, the slide I put up about the nuns. Saying you're not affiliated with any major religion is a lot different than saying you're an atheist. And there's a lot of that group, it's been broken down. Most will say they're spiritual but not religious, or most will say they're agnostic, and only a small percentage of that will actually say, yes, I'm an atheist. So it's a message that still, I think, has to be tempered if it's going to be received well.
Thank you.
If I wonder if you thought about getting the word out to the other humanist societies throughout the nation. I think that may be one of the best marketing tools you could use.
I have been. I attended the American Atheist Convention in Atlanta last year, and from their listing, I emailed a number of organizations just like HSSB, and I got some responses, and I've guested on podcasts since then, given this presentation. We just haven't yet come forward with a partner who can help us get this film made, but certainly a lot of interest. And accumulated a good mailing list, which is, for independent film marketing, is a tremendous head start, because your advocates are your audience to start with. So yeah, I'm kind of doing that already, but thanks for that suggestion, Hal.
What would you think the percentage of the people who have the money and the power in Hollywood, what is their religious background? Do they represent the larger population, and what stake do they have in representing us appropriately?
Well, when you talk about people at the top of the industry, there are some noted atheists, probably more than would be willing to come forward and say that. I think at their end of the spectrum, though, they also have to think about the bottom line. There are some, though, that might be willing to come out and take a chance and support something. I just haven't been able to get to any of those. That's why if anyone is buddies with Bill Maher or Seth MacFarlane, people like that, there's certainly a lot of... Brad Pitt is an outspoken atheist and produces and supports films. Rob Reiner, yeah. That's why I keep giving this talk and hope that someone will help me get it made. I have some questions from the Zoom chat, which I want to take. So someone says there's a movie which has an atheist protagonist, and that's the old film Elmer Gantry. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen Elmer Gantry. Certainly modern audiences probably have forgotten it, so maybe it'd be ripe for a remake. Yeah, you can name a lot of films that, people are always coming to me and say, well, you forgot about this film and you forgot about that film. I don't think there's anything that's really broken through in a mainstream way, and anytime someone points me to something like The Sunset Limited or The Ledge, I'm like, really? This is how an atheist is depicted? So.
This is really wonderful.
Thanks.
I very much believe that this can be transformative. So you're here at the end of the film festival. Were you attending the film festival?
I was not, no.
Oh, that's too bad, because I had a coworker friend who entered a script in the film festival, and it was turned into a film. There's people that go to the film festival.
Oh yeah,
for that
well, as Judy
purpose.
said, I won an award from this film festival, so I have a relationship with the Santa Barbara Film Festival. I believe I entered the script in their annual competition, screenplay competition last year, and it wasn't selected. So, you never know what, with screenplay competitions, they select people like ourselves to be the reader, the volunteer readers. And with something like this, I've gotten some really harsh negative feedback because I think I kind of pressed some buttons of the beliefs of the person who happened to be reading it.
I mean,
what are you going to do?
I think your idea of making the connection, Bill Maher would be ideal. He made a film, Religulous.
Yeah, Irreligious.
That would be great. I'm also curious, does GoFundMe work on this kind of scale or just smaller stuff?
It does. I actually did do a crowdfunding effort that it failed to meet its goal. So I've pursued that as well. I do have one investor who is an active atheist who invests in feature films, and that half of the budget that I already have is what he's committed to, but I'm still, like I said, about $300,000-$400,000 short. So if anyone has, an extra couple $100,000 lying around.
Did you make an effort to find out what the majority of people, what their moral standards are, and to include that in the actions of your characters so that the hero is, with or without God, is manifesting what the majority of people think translates into a positive moral code?
I can't say that I actively did research to try and have it directly feed into the screenplay, but I am someone, as now an outspoken atheist in my life, I'm constantly consuming books and surveys and articles and videos on the topic. So I'm sure in an indirect way that filtered into it. And as I said, I don't want to use a religious phrase, I don't want to preach to the choir. All I want to do is to hold up a mirror to faith and have people just reassess it. If someone wants to come away and say, I've seen your movie and I'm still going to church next Sunday, that's great. But one of my pet peeves really isn't the nasty fundamentalists who are always doing horrible things, because we know what they're about. No one's going to change their minds. But what bothers me most are people like my ex-wife who say, no, I have to go to church, but they really don't examine it in their own lives. They don't want to think about it. They don't know why it's really just part of the fabric of their lives because it's how they were raised, and it would upset their mom or something like that, or it's just a familiar thing. And I think if it's that important, it should be constantly thought about and assessed and reassessed. And as I said, if through all that careful thought you still come down standing behind your faith, then I'll applaud that. There's a lady in the back who had a question.
My thought is when children are born and are raised in certain religions, they're brainwashed. And I believe that children should not be taught any religion until they are of age, or, where they understand it more. And, they can choose their own religion, whether it's atheism or whatever. But it's just brainwashing.
Yes, that's true. I think brainwashing is a strong word. It certainly does apply in some extreme instances. I think it just becomes something familiar and too intricately interwoven into their identity to easily walk away from. I think it's a lot we ask sometimes of religious people, to just say, oh, listen to me or watch this video, and then turn your back on this thing that's been vital in your life. Having been a Christian as an adult, I have a little more sympathy for it than a lot of atheists. So to answer your question, that's what I try and put into the movie. It's not an angry, nasty brand of atheism that's depicted, but a more compassionate form. I just want to check. I have some interesting comments. Someone said, most people go to church with as much thought as they brush their teeth. I like that one. A woman said, my husband and I celebrate our 60th anniversary, and this story could be our story. So maybe it's a little dated. Another word for dated might be timeless. Religious conflicts, particularly those brought about by marriage, interfaith marriage, are as old as time. And I chose it because I think it's one of those very relatable, very frequent, very everyday instances where faiths clash, where ideologies clash. I myself have relatives who, my dad was Catholic, my mom was Protestant. She won that argument, so I was raised Protestant. But I have a cousin on the Catholic side of the family who married a Protestant, not an atheist, a Protestant, and they had to run away. My family was raised in upstate New York, and they live in Arizona. That's how far away they went to get away from the vitriol that was foisted on them by their family over these religious differences. And whether it's interfaith, interracial, marriage is something that we can all relate to, and I think it just happens often.
Did you or were you tempted to put forth a source of non-Christian or non-church related morality? Were you tempted to, or did you have a source of moral behavior which is not based on God?
You mean actually depicted in the film?
Yeah.
I hear where you're coming from. It's one of my favorite arguments to have with believers is, where does morality come from? And I feel I understand it completely in a way that doesn't involve the idea of God. I didn't want the film to get that heady and to lecture anyone. I think morality comes across strongest when it's done by example and not by dogma. The thing that occurred to me in my real life situation is, here the religious people wanted me to lie, and I was the only one not willing to lie. And so that I do put firmly in that, and it's one of the things, he's a really terrible liar, and even about little things, like he breaks out in a sweat when he has to tell a fib and he can't lie. So that's one of the ways I try to demonstrate that non-religious people certainly have a moral compass that's innate.
Hi, I'm Bonnie. I apologize, I missed the beginning of your talk.
I'll start over.
In my life lately, I would call myself confused or a wandering Jew because I go to Humanist Society, I hang out with these religious fanatics, I go to the temple, and I make excuses for myself saying, well, I'm just investigating what's true and what's false. But Mayer said, no one can tell a joke anymore, and the worst people are the young people. We've lost our sense of humor in this culture, in this country, and I found it very amusing, and then he told a bunch of jokes about that.
The key takeaway I take from that is what you mentioned about, comedians come under fire for telling jokes. Ricky Gervais, who's one of the brightest and best outspoken atheists in the world, talks about that a lot, about woke ideology erroneously coming after comedy. And it's something I have to be mindful. I'm poking fun at a sacred cow, literally. But you know what? I'll take that chance. It's a really funny story. Once you get into this lane, it doesn't take a lot to extract comedy from religion.
Hello, thank you. I'm happy we're all here together today and in this wonderful universe. I hope your movie is being made and we can all support you in exercising your freedom of speech and freedom of religion, including atheism and agnosticism. There's 8 billion of us. It's 2024. It's very colorful. I appreciate the colorfulness.
Thank you.
It's about us to figure out how to do it together, peacefully and positively. I hope you succeed and bring us all together more so than divide us.
Thank you. I threw in the word life-affirming in describing my own movie, but really it has a very warm, positive ending. Basically, everyone realizes that their connections to each other, in this case their family or their loved ones, are far more important to them than any faith. And that's where everyone chooses to put their faith in each other.
Yeah, if you don't mind me saying so. Multi-faith, there's a terminology called multi-faith. I am multi-faith. I'm a part of everything I want to be part of at any which given time. It might change, it might not. And I only like the good stuff, not the bad stuff. Yeah,
Great.
it's
Well,
pretty
thank
simple.
you for that.
Is this going to be translated into different languages?
I sure hope so.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's not too hard or expensive for even small independent films to do these days, thanks to a lot of AI and things like that. My first task is to get it done, and that's a little further down the to-do list, is translating into other languages. Where are you from, sir, originally?
Planet Earth.
Planet Earth.
I'm a human being. I have
Can you
two
be a little more
parents.
specific?
Yes, East Germany.
East Germany, okay, well,
Yes,
German would
I
definitely
like
be
the
one of
reference
key
earlier.
languages.
I appreciate all that stuff with Bruce Springsteen and Reagan and
Oh, well, yeah, there you
Gorbachev.
go.
I love your enthusiasm for making the world a better place. I take it as such.
Thank you.
And I hope Brad Pitt and Bill Maher get on board.
That would be great.
I hope so
Maybe
too.
Brad Pitt's on the Zoom. Is Brad Pitt on the Zoom call? We don't know. He'd probably use an alias.
Have you considered GoFundMe?
We did have a crowdfunding campaign. It was not successful. I mean, I could try it again as word maybe gets out there more through presentations like this. I tried it early on before I had developed this presentation and started connecting with more people. So perhaps it's worth another try.
You know, when you were talking about well-known people could really promote this, John Lennon with the song Imagine is very well known, and No Religion 2 is part of the lyrics. So I think that there has been some movement in that direction over time. Obviously not enough to bring about the changes we would like to have.
Yeah, and I'm sure John Lennon reached a lot of people with just those few words. Imagine there's no heaven, no religion too. Not too unsurprisingly, the rise of the moral majority in the 1980s tried to ban that song from a lot of radio stations around the country. There's always a fight going on about it.
Mine is more of a comment. I wanted to say thank you for this. I'm a member here of the Unitarian Universalist Society, and Ron and I have our discussions sometimes about atheism. And I was raised as a Protestant with just not a strong evangelical kind, but just the usual. With me, it started with paganism, because in Sunday school, pagans were bad. You know, well, I'm finding out, oh, pagans are just what everybody, earth religion, and, you know, it's the kind of
pagan
thing.
was a word for
Yeah.
a bad person,
Yeah, and
when
I
actually
think
it was a real thing called paganism that predates Christianity.
Right, and it took me a while to learn that. And our minister helped me learn that. And I think atheism, the same kind of thing, a word to many people. I mean, many people will, as you have well learned, will just not regard it at all. But I think for a lot of us, the more we learn about it, it's not a bad word anymore. It's not what we are. It's not what I am. It's probably not what I will be.
Well, those of us in this room know that, but I recently watched a documentary, and I'm terrible with names and titles, so it's going to escape me for the moment, but it was basically just about living life as an atheist. And it starts out with this supercut clip of comments about atheists and atheism, not from like movies and TV, scripted things, but from like talking heads and political pundits, and it's horrible. Atheists have no moral compass. Atheists are evil. Atheists are trying to destroy America. All these things. So the perception out there actually is far worse than what I've just depicted.
I think this is wonderful because I think that's what we need are things that show real life people that are moral people, even if they don't have the message. I'm anxious to see your movie.
Me too.
I don't have any money, but I mean, I'll
I just want to see it. I just want to see a movie like this.
But I think you're on the right track. I think that it's a very important thing to
I think so too.
demonize the word and the perception. And I wish
and you know,
luck
if
in that.
one small movie, it doesn't take a lot these days for a movie to be considered successful. No one's going back to the theaters that much still since COVID. Everything's streaming and online. And surprisingly, small films with no stars can be number one on Netflix some week because something catches on. And all it would take would be one movie like this to maybe be even moderately successful for other filmmakers to say, hey, we got to get on that bandwagon. There's people that want to see something like this. Like the examples I use with pop music. It just takes one person to put a little punch a hole in the dam for the water to start flowing through.
I just wanted to assuage some of your guilt of being in a sanctuary. The minister is a member of the Humanist Society and is an atheist.
Well, thank you. I don't really feel guilt about it. It's just maybe a sense of irony.
No, just on top of what you had just mentioned, I think nomenclature is one of our worst enemies.
Absolutely.
And when you hear the word atheist, to most people, they think of Madeline Murray O'Hare, or they think of ugly things without even having an idea of what it actually means, which is just that there's no evidence to support the notion that there's an actual God up in heaven watching over us and watching what we do in bed. But I love the premise of the movie. It was so brilliant. In fact, I love the premise of how you started this off with how pop culture can really make changes. Will and Grace and the gay community.
I threw a little thing of Will and Grace up in there.
Exactly.
But they were...
It was great. And I love the part about the priest having the crisis of faith when the atheist...
And I've had some people, and I'll interrupt you for a second. I've had some people say, well, that would never happen. And there's a shelf full of books by clergymen who have...
There are support groups for fallen ministers and stuff. The other thing I was going to say along the lines of the nomenclature, when you hear atheist and most people hear that term, they immediately shut off. It's like when Bernie Sanders said, democratic socialist.
Right.
He said the word socialist and it just closed all the doors. And he probably would have been president had he not used that term. It's the nomenclature, not the concept. So when people hear socialist, you've lost half the country immediately. Well, when you hear atheist, you lose most Americans.
I kind of lean into that and make fun of it a little bit in the movie. Like for the first part of the movie, they keep referring to it as the A word. Yeah. And a lot of people mistake which A word they're talking about. Right. And I debated to even, do I use the word atheist? One of my favorite things that have been said often by prominent atheists is there really shouldn't be a word atheist. We don't need a word for something we don't believe in. There's no word for people that don't believe in leprechauns. There's no word for people that don't believe in vampires. But it's the best we've got. And you're right, nomenclature, language. As Judy mentioned, I started my career in advertising. I think branding is a big part of religion and non-religion in this country. Just the fact that religion stands behind the word faith, whether they do this intuitively or calculatingly, that's a great brand. Who doesn't like faith? have faith in me. I have faith in you. Take a leap of faith. Now, if religion was rebranded as worshiping supernatural beings that live in another dimension, maybe it wouldn't be so palatable. Or if atheism was rebranded as reason, maybe it wouldn't be so unpalatable.
No, I was just going back to your presentation. At the beginning, you're saying how all of these artists who went in and then the wall fell down. Did they make it happen? No, but it was sort of like chipping away at it. Same as Will and Grace, Ellen DeGeneres, all these shows where maybe people don't have people like that in their lives, but when they see it, if you have like that one gay friend, then all of a sudden you can say, oh, okay, gay marriage isn't so bad because you all of a sudden have something like your friend Bob. Yeah. Here's this guy Bob who you thought was this upstanding, ethical, moral man who opened up this new thing. And I think that's all you're trying to do is put that little...
Yeah, I'm really not trying to deconvert anyone as much as to change perception of atheists. And if along the way that helps someone re-examine their own faith, I'm for that. But it's not attempting to destroy anyone's faith, really, although there may be some elements of it that might challenge it.
I mean, I'm listening to all this, and all I can think is if somebody asked you to prove your atheism, you would have an uphill battle.
To prove my atheism or to prove an atheist belief?
To prove that there is no God is as difficult.
My response to that is that I actually can prove there is no God. Allow me to take 30 seconds to do it. There's different standards and degrees of proof. Can I prove with 100% metaphysical certainty there's no God? No, but do I need to? For example, I cannot, nor can anyone in this room, prove that there's no such thing as vampires. But I don't wear garlic around my neck just in case. For the purposes of me living my life and making choices in my life, and after all, who cares about anything more than that? The non-existence of vampires has been proven 100%. If a vampire shows up and threatens me with their teeth and their undeadness, I might change my mind. But until that point, I give it no more thought. If a believer wanted to engage in debate with me, I think there's tons of arguments that, yes, maybe there's no one mathematical proof, but there's certainly a lot of things that point to that conclusion. Certainly more than I've ever heard to the contrary.
I'm wondering what the attitude is of the big atheist organizations towards this. For example, I see them spending a lot of money on legal battles.
Yeah.
To me, this is very cheap compared to what they're doing. It would have a much bigger impact.
I've talked to Nick Fish, who's the national president of American Atheists, and the problem with that is they feel their priority are those legislative battles, and maybe it should be. That's what they're there for. There's a lot of important battles on all sorts of fronts that they are trying to wage. So to put money into an entertainment project, I could make an argument that it's a worthwhile investment for them, but I don't think I've been able to move them. I think they couldn't answer to their membership with that type of expenditure. That's why I think it's going to take individuals with the wherewithal to get behind it. Thank you all so much. This has been fun. It's been great. Thank you to everyone online.
Thank you very much. That was excellent. I also have a great story about how Dave and I got married, because that was our moment of truth when we had to kind of come clean. So, and it's actually, I was interviewed by a local radio station, so I'll give you the link. You can listen to it on your drive back to LA. Our wedding ceremony was quite spectacularly disastrous, and wonderful, looking back on it.
How many years?
It'll be 39, I think. Yeah, so it's working out so far, yeah. And with that, thank you all for attending. Thanks again to Jeff and Beth for making the trip up here and sharing with us.